It was a night like no other. The venue, an extravagant ballroom in the heart of Washington, D.C., was filled with the city's elite, politicians, celebrities, and business moguls, all gathered for one of the most talked-about charity galas of the year. The air was thick with excitement, champagne flutes clinking, laughter echoing through the grand hall. Yet, amidst the glamour and socializing, a single question lingered in the air. What was Barron Trump about to do that would completely change the course of the evening? Barron Trump, a figure who had largely remained in the background throughout his life, was rarely seen in public in settings like this. Known for keeping a low profile, the son of former President Donald Trump had avoided the spotlight for most of his life. Yet tonight, he was stepping into a world where eyes were on him, and the world was about to witness something unprecedented. As he entered the ballroom, his presence immediately drew attention. Dressed in a sharp, tailored black suit, a crisp white shirt, and no flashy accessories, Barron exuded a quiet confidence that contrasted sharply with the flashiness of the event. But it wasn't just his appearance that turned heads, it was his demeanor. Barron walked through the crowd with an air of determination, his eyes scanning the room, never rushing, yet always purposeful. Guests exchanged whispers. What was Barron Trump doing here? Was he going to make a public statement about his family, the country, or his personal views? Was this the night he would finally break his silence and step into the political or public sphere? Some speculated that he might share something about his father's legacy, while others wondered if Barron was simply there to observe the high society spectacle. But whatever the reasons behind his presence, one thing was clear. Barron Trump was about to make a move that would leave everyone in the room, and the world, stunned. As the evening unfolded, Barron was seemingly just another guest among many. His silence spoke volumes, yet it was clear that people were eager to see if he would say or do something to make his mark. The gala was a celebration, but it was also a moment where high-profile figures often made their intentions known, whether it was a charity endorsement, a political statement, or a display of wealth and power. But Barron was different. His presence alone made a statement that was more profound than words could express. The buzz around him intensified when the host of the gala, a well-known media mogul, called for everyone's attention to announce the next segment of the evening. As the host spoke, Barron remained still, his gaze focused and unwavering. Guests around him shifted, whispering to one another, sensing that something was about to happen. What could Barron possibly do next? Was he about to speak? Would he join the conversation? Or was he content simply observing? It was in that moment, as the crowd's chatter died down, that Barron made his move. He stood up from his seat, drawing everyone's attention with a subtle yet powerful shift in his posture. The murmurs began. All eyes were on him as he stepped toward the center of the room, where the podium stood. The host, caught off guard by Barron's sudden action, hesitated, but stepped aside, giving Barron the floor. For a moment, Barron remained silent. The room held its breath, unsure of what would happen next. Was this a calculated statement? Or was it something impulsive? Then, Barron raised his hand and the room grew quiet. A few seconds passed, and just as it seemed like nothing would happen, he spoke. "What if I told you that things aren't as they seem?" Barron's voice was calm, yet filled with an intensity that immediately captured the attention of every person in the room. It wasn't a dramatic opening, but it was enough to send a ripple of curiosity through the crowd. No one had ever heard Barron Trump speak in such a manner before. The room was silent. No one dared to speak, as Barron's words lingered in the air like a heavy fog. "What if I told you that things aren't as they seem?" His voice was steady, but the weight of his statement struck everyone who had been caught off guard by his sudden boldness. The guests exchanged confused glances, their curiosity piqued. Was this a prank? Or was Barron about to reveal something deep and personal about his family, his life, or perhaps even the country? His words were cryptic, but that was what made them so compelling. Barron took a step forward, his presence now undeniable. "I've been told to stay silent, to remain in the shadows. But silence doesn't bring change. Silence keeps us comfortable, keeps us blind to what's happening around us," he continued, his eyes scanning the crowd. Every person in the room was listening intently now. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. No one had expected Barron to speak out like this. He had always been the quiet one, staying out of the public eye, never engaging in the kind of drama his family was often surrounded by. Yet here he was, standing in front of some of the most powerful people in the room, speaking truth to power. "Tonight, I want to change that narrative. I want to challenge what you think you know," Barron said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Because the truth is, the things we're told to believe, the things we accept as normal, are often the things that hold us back. And I'm tired of pretending that everything is fine when it isn't." A hush fell over the ballroom. The moment was heavy with anticipation. Barron was now officially a voice in a room that had once ignored him. He wasn't just another guest. He had captured the attention of everyone present. The tension was palpable. But Barron wasn't done. He turned towards the host, who had retreated to the side, clearly caught off guard by the young Trump's defiance. "You all think you know the game, the system, how things work," Barron continued. "But let me tell you, it's all a lie. We've been fed a version of reality that benefits the few, while the many suffer in silence." For a moment, it seemed like the entire room had held its breath. Every eye was on him, every ear straining to hear the next words that would change the night forever. The room fell into a stunned silence, with the weight of Barron's words lingering in the air. The guests, who had come expecting a typical evening of socializing and charity, were now gripped by a sudden shift in tone. Barron had done what few expected him to do. He had defied the expectations placed on him by society, his family, and the public. Whispers began to rise. Some were in awe of his boldness, while others looked at each other in disbelief, unsure of how to process what had just happened. How could the son of a former president, someone so often kept in the background, stand up in front of the nation's elite and speak so forcefully? But Barron wasn't finished. With a calm yet determined expression, Barron addressed the room again, his voice unwavering. "For too long we've been told to accept things as they are, whether it's the media, the politicians, or the power structures we've grown so accustomed to. But the reality is, nothing is as it seems. The world is changing, and we have to change with it." His words hung in the air, almost like a challenge to everyone present. He wasn't just speaking about politics or global issues. Barron was speaking about the very nature of truth, perception, and the status quo. The room was divided. Some people were fascinated, while others were uneasy, unsure if they could trust what they were hearing. Was Barron's speech a well-thought-out declaration of independence, or was it just the beginning of a much larger movement? At the back of the room, a prominent media figure leaned over to a fellow guest, whispering, "Is he for real? Is this part of a bigger plan?" But Barron had already turned his attention to the front, addressing the gathering with a quiet but fierce resolve. His voice was clear now, stronger with every word. "I don't expect you to understand everything I've said tonight, but know this. The world is waking up, and I'm not here to play by the same rules that have been set before me." As Barron's words echoed throughout the ballroom, the room remained divided. The elite guests, who were used to a night of superficial conversations and charity auctions, now found themselves faced with something entirely different. The energy shifted. What was once a casual gathering now felt like the precipice of a new era. Some were nodding in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of how to respond. A moment of silence followed Barron's statement, as if everyone was waiting for the next big reveal. Some guests exchanged glances, their faces betraying a mix of intrigue and disbelief. Could Barron really be serious? Was he going to push even further, challenging everything they believed in? His words were far more potent than anyone could have anticipated. Suddenly, a figure near the front of the room, a well-known political donor, stood up. The eyes of the room turned toward him, expecting a response. The man had been silently observing the entire interaction, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Barron," he began, his tone cool yet curious. "You speak of change. But what exactly do you mean by that? What exactly are you proposing here?" For a moment, Barron's expression softened, as if he had anticipated this challenge. He didn't flinch or back away. Instead, he took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before responding. "I'm proposing that we stop pretending everything is fine, that we stop allowing ourselves to be silenced, to be told what to believe, to be told what our place in the world is. The people in this room, and the world outside these walls, deserve better than the lies we've been fed. The truth has been buried for too long." The room was still, but a sense of urgency had begun to build. Barron's confidence seemed to grow with every word. He wasn't just speaking to the guests in the room, he was speaking to a wider audience. In that moment, it was clear that Barron Trump wasn't going to fade back into the background. His voice, though calm and steady, was powerful enough to shake the foundations of the evening. What started as a simple charity gala had now turned into a pivotal moment, a moment when Barron Trump was no longer just the silent son of a former president. He had arrived, and he wasn't going anywhere. As Barron finished speaking, the room was filled with a charged silence. His words had landed like a bombshell, and now the guests were left to process what they had just heard. Some were nodding in agreement, others were visibly uncomfortable. The shift was palpable. Barron Trump, who had always been a figure hidden in the shadows, was now standing at the forefront of this monumental moment, daring to challenge the status quo. It was the media mogul, the host of the gala, who finally broke the tension. He stood up slowly, his face unreadable. He had been silent through the entire exchange, but now it was clear that he felt the need to address the situation. With a practiced smile, he gestured toward Barron. "Well, Barron," the host began, his voice attempting to remain steady but betraying a hint of unease. "That was certainly unexpected, but I think we all appreciate your passion. Now let's get back to the purpose of tonight. Celebrating the charitable causes that bring us together, right?" The words hung in the air, an attempt to steer the evening back to its original course. However, it was clear that Barron's speech had disrupted the flow in a way that no one could ignore. The guests who had once come to the gala with light hearts and fancy conversation were now weighed down by the gravity of what had been said. Barron didn't back down. Instead, he locked eyes with the host, his gaze firm and unwavering. "You want to talk about charity? About causes?" Barron's voice was sharp now, his confidence growing with each word. "Charity isn't just about handing out money. It's about creating real change. About standing up for the truth, not hiding behind a mask of kindness while everything around us falls apart." There was a noticeable shift in the room. A few of the guests began to murmur in agreement, while others were starting to look uncomfortable with Barron's words. The whole atmosphere had shifted. What was meant to be a night of glitz and glamour was now a battleground for ideas. The media mogul, sensing that the tide was turning, cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well, Barron, you certainly have a lot on your mind," he said, trying to regain control of the room. "But tonight is about unity, not division." Barron didn't flinch. He stood tall, his voice resonating as he spoke again, louder this time, so the entire room could hear. "Unity doesn't come from pretending everything is fine when it isn't. It comes from confronting the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. You can't fix a broken system if you refuse to acknowledge that it's broken in the first place. As Barron's words continued to linger in the air, something remarkable began to happen. Not everyone in the room was unsettled by his defiance. A few guests, previously silent, started to rise in support, and their actions caused a ripple effect throughout the crowd. They weren't just nodding in agreement, they were standing up, metaphorically and physically, to what Barron had said. One by one, individuals who had initially been hesitant to engage began to speak out. A prominent philanthropist, known for his quiet but powerful influence in the charity world, stood and clapped slowly, his voice cutting through the tension. "The kid's right," he said, his words resonating with the crowd. "The truth doesn't always come wrapped in a bow, but it's still the truth." The room was divided, but for the first time that evening the energy began to shift in Barron's favor. A sense of empowerment swept through the space, as more and more guests found the courage to voice their own frustrations with the status quo. A woman sitting near the front, a business magnate known for her bold approach to leadership, spoke up. "We've been too comfortable for too long," she said, her voice steady but firm. "Maybe it's time for a change." Barron's eyes scanned the room, watching as the once silent crowd transformed into a chorus of voices, all united in their desire for something more. His bold stance, his willingness to challenge the comfortable and familiar, had ignited a spark that couldn't be extinguished. As Barron looked around, he realized that this was more than just an argument or a speech. It was a movement, a shift in the way people thought about power, privilege, and the role of the individual in shaping the future. And for the first time, Barron understood the full weight of his words. He wasn't just speaking to a room full of elites anymore. He was speaking to a generation ready for change. As the applause died down, the mood in the room shifted once again. While many guests were now rallying behind Barron, others felt a growing unease. The gala, once intended to celebrate charity and unity, had transformed into a battleground of ideologies. Some guests, too powerful or too proud to accept Barron's challenge, exchanged whispered words behind their hands, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the evening had taken. In one corner of the room, a former political figure, known for his sharp tongue, leaned into a fellow guest. "This is absurd," he muttered. "Who does he think he is, challenging everything we've built?" But despite the murmurs of dissent, Barron remained resolute. The room may have been divided, but Barron knew that he had stirred something deeper than just temporary discomfort. He had caused a shift in perception, a moment where his voice had been heard, where he had declared himself not just as the son of a former president, but as a force to be reckoned with. The host, sensing the chaos creeping into the evening, took a deep breath and approached Barron. "You've caused quite the stir," he said with an awkward chuckle. "But I think we can all agree that the spirit of the night was meant to be about unity. Perhaps we should return to that." Barron turned to face him, his expression unchanged. "Unity doesn't come from ignoring the truth," Barron replied, his voice calm but piercing. "It comes from acknowledging it, no matter how uncomfortable it may be." As the evening concluded, Barron Trump had undeniably changed the course of the night. His bold words had not only challenged the elite crowd, but had sparked a movement, one that called for honesty, for confronting uncomfortable truths, and for a new way of thinking. The gala would never be the same again, and neither would Barron's place in the world. Now, as we reflect on this unexpected turn of events, we want to know, what do you think about Barron's actions? Do you agree with his message or feel it's too much too soon? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more surprising stories.